This is Robbie McKenzie. Welcome to Youth Ministry 6.3. We have Kyle Macon. Going to interview him a little bit about some of the experiences. This is lesson 5, I believe. And what I want to do is to get Kyle, because he's kind of a newbie, so to speak. He's been at Owl Hollow Church of Christ in Winchester for about 2 years now. And so just wanted to interview him a little bit. So Kyle, kind of tell me how long, so you've been there 2 years. Talk about some challenges that you've had as a youth minister from any standpoint you want to, some challenges you've had in your first two years there at Owl Hollow.
Well, and when you asked me, first I want to thank you for asking me to come on, because for me, this is it's a real honor to be able to share my experiences. I think it's something that we're kind of reserved about sometimes as youth ministers. We don't,
surely,
we don't necessarily like to talk about what happens in our ministry,
right,
at a very personal level. And I think for us to begin to grow, this has got to start happening a lot more. But for me, I faced some interesting challenges. I didn't really come into the job like a normal youth minister would. I moved home in 2008, and this job was kind of put out there to me as, hey, we've got summer youth internship. You are.
Sorry.
No, it's okay.
Go ahead.
But it was like, you are, you're one of our guys. I grew up at this congregation, and they said, hey, we've got this internship open. I was 25 at the time. And I was a little hesitant about it. I had come out of college not really being able to jump into the youth ministry field. I'd looked for jobs. I'd applied for jobs. I'd actually interviewed for several jobs. And it was always to the point where you don't have the experience, you can't get the position. So this was really kind of an open door that God provided for me. And it was interesting because it was at home. But as I began, I started with that internship. I stayed on as a youth advisor for a year, and then, almost a year, and then I began as the interim youth minister. Nick Fowler, who was here before me, did a great job, and he and his wife left for Brazil to take up work there, which is amazing. And it was kind of this weird transition period where I was started in the summer and then began into the fall. So there was really never a starting point for me. And I think that created a difficulty for me as a youth minister. A lot of youth ministers come in, they have a jump off point where they can go, okay, bam, 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 I know this is what I want to do. That I kind of had to deal with, okay, this is what we've been doing. How can I transition this into what I see we need to be doing?
Mm-hmm.
But I did make a lot of rookie mistakes, and I think everybody does kind of with their first ministry, because you come out of college and you're so gung-ho, and I think a lot of youth ministers gung-ho, and they're like, I want to do this, and I want to do this, and I want to do this, and I want to accomplish this, and we're going to go to this many events and do this many things, and, and you get so wrapped up in that, you miss the first 2 years, which is so important because that's the time to get to know your group.
Mm-hmm.
You can't start planning these things till you get to know your group. And I'm not talking about the individuals, but really your group dynamic. I think that's something that we can get so wrapped up in events and so wrapped up in programs that we forget people. Absolutely. And we forget our teenagers, are individuals who have a certain dynamic between them. And I was guilty of that. I jumped in head first, and I was like, all right, let's go to Lake Winnie and let's do all this. And then I look around and I'm going, okay, what's not working? Something's not working.
Sure.
And it wasn't just from a number standpoint, because, this is one of those things we talk about a lot of times. We get trapped in numbers. It wasn't from a number standpoint. I just saw my kids not growing the way that they should, and I had to step back and go, okay, what am I doing wrong here? Where am I misstepping? So one of the challenges was just taking the time to get to know my kids.
Absolutely.
And another thing, theory is great. Talking about theory is a wonderful. You can sit in a classroom all day long and talk about theory, but until the rubber hits the road,
Yeah.
you can throw those out the window sometimes because, you can talk about programs, you can talk about styles of youth ministry.
Right.
I think finding your own style is another one of those things in the first 2 years that you have to really work at. And to me, I really haven't hit that point till almost the last month. And that's kind of crazy to think. It's sad because, the span of youth ministry now is what, 18 months?
Yeah,
You know,
absolutely.
and a lot of youth ministers are quitting before they ever get to that point. They don't come to know their congregation. They don't come to know the kids in their youth group. And so they're missing out on this potential for what they're doing. And I think a lot of that comes out of something that I've faced. It's just discouragement. I, I think I've told you this before. I feel like I've had every rock thrown at me possible in youth ministry in the first 2 years.
As you should.
As I should. But it's kind of like, I've had to take over as full-time minister as well.
Right.
3 months in,
Mm-hmm.
our current minister found an opportunity somewhere else and left. And so I was kind of standing holding the ball going, okay, what do I do now? I mean, I literally showed up one Sunday and they were like, oh, by the way, you have to do all the preaching now to find a new guy. And it's just kind of like, okay, I've got to do that and youth ministry. So, it's things like that. But I'm glad I've had those experiences because now I know how to deal with them. Absolutely. Now I know how to handle those things. But I mean, they're discouraging. And I think that's the reason 18 months is that span. People, I mean, I'm a very results-driven kind of individual. If I don't see results in something, I get very down and out about it.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's why a lot of youth ministers are bailing out at 18 months.
Sure.
They just don't see the results that they're expecting, the results they're looking for, and boom, they're gone. Well, I'm going to go somewhere else. Sure. And you're shortchanging yourself and you're shortchanging your kids. And it's hard, it's difficult, but this is not an easy job.
Nope.
And if it was an easy job, the Lord wouldn't put so much emphasis on what we do as ministers.
Absolutely. So. Well, I mean, that's super. Those are a lot of the same experiences I encountered when my first 2 years here at Main Street. And I think that's kind of par for the course. I think what you hit on was important, the idea of relationships. And that's the biggest thing those first 2 years is getting to know the parents, getting to know the students, the grandparents, the family dynamics. And so what did you come to rely on those first 2 years when you did get discouraged, when you did go through those valleys, as Psalm 23 would talk about, when things got difficult, especially the first, you said the 3 months where you're doing this balancing act of, hey, I'm starting a new ministry, now I'm having to fill in a little bit, so I don't know what I'm doing, and you're pulled away. So what did you come to rely on? Who did you come to rely on? And
well, I mean, for the first part, and I know it may seem like a cookie cutter answer, but man, prayer.
Yeah.
I mean, it took an enormous amount of just spiritual focus because here I am with the responsibility of nourishing all these people, not just teenagers, which is difficult enough in and of itself because teenagers don't always grasp that concept. And you really have to struggle with it sometimes to get it across. Plus, they can be a little easily distracted. But
no way.
No, never. But you're also trying to nourish this entire congregation.
Yep.
Plus, trying to heal some wounds. I mean, anytime there's a transition in the church and it doesn't go as smoothly as planned, there's going to be wounds, and it's the response. I kind of took it upon myself to try to heal those wounds as best as I could. So here I am trying to heal these wounds, and for me, I was just tapping myself out so much spiritually that I had to go to prayer. But the other thing was I was fortunate enough to have friends
Yep.
and people my own age around that I could go to. I am a bit of an oddity in the youth ministry world, and the fact that I'm a single guy. Um, and really, when you talk about single youth ministers, it's interesting. You had Phil on last time because I
Yep.
mean it's me and Phil. That's the two that I know of.
Sure.
And you know, for guys who are married in youth ministry, don't dump everything onto your wife, but realize, I mean, that you do have something there. You do have a confidant. You do have a companion that you can share those times with, and that can lift you up. I had to go to friends, and fortunately, I have some amazing friends. I have some amazing friends who are spiritual, and then I have other youth ministers too. I think that's something that, like I said, youth ministers don't like to talk about the secret stuff that happens,
Right.
and you know, I've never had a problem with that.
Good.
We have Soldier Circle, and that's been any youth ministers that are out there. Find other youth ministers that you can talk with, even if it's not about youth ministry stuff, just to sit down and talk with, because they're going to be able to sympathize with you. They're going to be able to empathize with what you're going through,
Hmm.
and it's gonna bring you through. And I'll tell you, Soldier Circle was awesome for me because that there's just kind of, even though it was once a month, I could just go, look, here's what's happening. Nobody understands, and you guys go, yeah, we understand. That's kind of crazy. Um, so I mean, that was the biggest things that kind of got me through that time. But I had to kind of put everything on pause with my youth ministry, which I felt kind of hurt me.
Yeah.
And it's really taken a year to kind of it's almost like four times whatever you have to pause. That's the time that it takes to make up. It took three to 4 months, so I had to add 12 months to repair all that. And
Yeah.
it's I just now am seeing kind of a full circle coming back around. So,
That's good.
but that's kind of what helped me make it through.
That's good. That's good. Now, if you a couple more questions that I have. What books would you recommend? Say I'm going into youth ministry, and you've been there for 2 years. What give me about 3 books or 2 books or 1 book, whatever you want to do, up to 3 books that you would recommend me read if I were going into youth ministry.
The first book that I read on recommended reading, actually from Nick during one of my internships, was awesome. Was Youth Minister's Honeymoon.
Okay.
Enid Rinks, and I can't remember.
Josh Harden.
Yes, and that was awesome because it really kind of just said, hey, don't get too ahead of yourself. Slow down. Take your time. Um, Youth ministry isn't just fun. There's responsibility that's involved here. You got to handle some serious stuff, so take it very seriously. Um, and for me, especially in that point of my maturity, that's what I needed to hear. But I mean, you get stuff like purpose-driven youth ministry, which is almost a standard when it comes to the classroom.
Yep.
That focuses very much on the group dynamic, understanding the group dynamic and how to utilize that.
Yep.
So that's kind of the technical. That's more of a technical how to. But what I've learned with that book is don't try to implement every single thing in that book because it may not fit for you.
Sure.
Youth ministry in small churches, because we are by Rick Cromie.
Right.
That book awesome. I'm rereading it right now, because I mean the majority of people who serve in youth ministry serve smaller congregations. That was one of those things that I'd made the rookie mistake of doing, because you see all these large congregations. You go, oh, I want to be like this church, and they're doing this over here. And
Yeah.
you brought up Joseph earlier. Joseph,
Yep.
their congregation has 500 people here.
Phew.
We have around 400 to 500 people. We have 150 on a good Sunday. And so what they do is different than what we do, even in that small margin there, because they're kind of considered on the church scale, they're kind of considered a medium-sized church.
Yeah.
Um, you know, we have to, do things a little bit differently. And so I made that mistake, and that book really kind of brought that to my side. It was like, hey, smaller churches, focus on the individual kids. I mean, if the population in your area isn't very high, you're not going to have that many kids on,
Right.
you're not going to have 150 kids. Now, you may, if you really work at it, you can do that, but it's not about the numbers. It's about the individual kids. And then the first 2 years in youth ministry, and I know I've brought this up at Soldier Circle before, but my favorite chapter in that's the first one. And it's just like discouragement. And Doug Fields is like, hey, get ready for it because it's coming. I mean, you're going to get discouraged. You're going to get beat out because youth ministry is one of those things where you don't see automatic results. So, we have to be patient and we have to kind of look ahead, continually look ahead. So those are kind of the three that I've pulled from the most. But one that's not on there, isn't really youth ministry, is Wild Goose Chase.
Yeah, yeah, that's good.
Wild Goose Chase by Mark Batterson. That book is awesome. Talking about changing your spiritual journey, that changed my spiritual journey. So, kind of thinking, okay, how is God being involved in my life? And how do I need to let him be involved in my, I got to stop letting failure. I've got to stop letting all these things stand in my way to being what God wants me to be. So those are my four.
Great. Well, I appreciate you, Kyle. And one more thing that I ask everyone I interview on here, if you had one bit of advice, you recommended books if I'm going into youth ministry. If you had one piece of advice to a youth minister coming into work, first job, first youth ministry job, first full-time ministry job, what would you say to me?
Slow down. Take your time. Seriously, I mean, take your time. Because like I said, we get so just like ramped up. We get so excited. And I mean, don't get me wrong, it's great to start a new ministry, but there has to be an element of wisdom there when you enter into a new ministry. And you need that time to get to know the congregation, the kids, because you can't start implementing things if they're not going to work for the kids, because and don't get me wrong, failures add up to success in the long run, because especially if you learn from them, but you want to make wise decisions. Is this profitable for my teenagers? Are they going to grow from this? So slow down would be my biggest piece of advice.
Well, good. Well, thank you, Kyle. Hang on a minute. I want to pray with you afterwards.
Right.
This is Youth Ministry 6.3, Lesson 5, Kyle Macon, your first 2 years of youth ministry. Thank you so much.
Hey, don't forget to rate, comment, and subscribe. This is going on YouTube, so got to throw that out there.
Yeah, appreciate that. Well, thanks so much. Hang in there.